Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea from Game Informer, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. As you are listening to this episode, I am out on vacation, so we are pre-recording this. So, as you might assume, no news segment on this episode, but if there's any news that hit between when I recorded this and when this episode comes out, rest assured we will hit it in the next news segment. But we just wrapped up an extremely busy holiday season, and a lot of huge games came out in the last 45 to 60 days. But we have two games that have hit Switch on this same day this episode launches. So we have Super Mario RPG and Persona 5 Tactica, both out now as you're listening to this. And we're going to be giving our thoughts on both of those games. Kyle Hilliard is joining me for this episode. Kyle has played Super Mario RPG to completion, and I have played a chunk of Persona 5 Tactica. But Kyle, we went on a pretty decent streak without having you on the show. But now we have you 2 times in 3 weeks. How are you feeling about your re-emergence on All Things Nintendo?
I'm happy to be here. Happy that you think of me. Happy to have gotten the assignment to review Super Mario RPG.
All right. Well, that is a nice little tease. So we're going to start right there because you have played more Mario RPG than I have Persona 5 Tactica. So we're framing yours as a review, whereas mine are just impressions. So we'll kick it off with the review. You seem pretty excited about it coming into last time that we had you on All Things Nintendo where you were giving your preview. How has the experience held up now that you've seen it all the way to the end?
Fantastic. I don't remember exactly what I said on the previous episode because I know it was framed more as a preview and taking place around like the early part of the game. But yeah, I really enjoyed my time with it a lot. Like, and to be clear, at the time of this recording, because we're recording a little early, I haven't written my review. I haven't settled on a score yet, and I really don't know where I'm gonna sort of land with all that. But man, it's really fun to go back to. It's such a clean, straightforward RPG. It's a little bit like, baby's first RPG to a certain degree, which is why it clicked so much with me when I was young, because it was like the first turn-based RPG that I really engaged with. And so like there are things that it's like it's pretty easy, like I actually hit the level cap on a few of the characters without really trying or going out of my way to like farm or anything like that. You don't really need to farm. I did notice that my playtime came in under, like if you go to how long to beat and you look at RPG, my playtime was like a fair bit shorter, like 7 hours or something like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which I think that's, a result of just the speed at which the game moves. And I also think, and I haven't tested this, so like don't hold me to it, but I really think that they like cleaned up the sort of trajectory of like leveling up and stuff like that. Like I don't remember having to farm a lot when I was young, but like I really did not have to farm at all playing this game, which is like a good thing. Like I like that about contemporary RPGs. Like one of my favorite things about Sea of Stars earlier this year was like I was just able to sort of stay on a trajectory and could engage with the fights as much as I wanted to. Like I still, the recommendation for any RPG like this is like fight everybody. Like that's no difference here. But like I never found myself needing to go out of my way to fight anybody. And I even went, after I beat the game, I went and fought the like optional super difficult boss, which is like I don't want to spoil. But I mean, it is one of those things. It is, a 20-year-old game at this point. It is the same boss.
More than 20. It's like it's coming up on 30.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I think you're right. And so like you can go look it up, but that was like the hardest boss in the game. And it only took me like, I don't know, 2 tries. I just had to like sort of rearrange what I had equipped and stuff like that. Like they were a boss that kept like putting Peach to sleep, who was my healer. And I was like, well, let me just equip something that prevents her from falling asleep. And then it was just a matter of getting it done. But like I just really enjoyed it. So there's the RPG side of it, which is like great, just straightforward, very understandable, fun to play RPG that still uses like the timing based attacks and defenses and stuff like that, which really make a difference. Like if you're pulling those off consistently, like you are doing so much better than when you would if you were trying to ignore it. You know what I mean? There's so many attacks that you can take 0 damage on if you do it right and stuff like that. And then the other part of it that's so fun is like it is absolutely a game that like I know it came out like today at the time you're listening to this, but it's a weird statement to make, but it's like this game wouldn't come out today. Right? Like there's so many things that like 2023 Nintendo would totally wag a finger at and be like, no, that can't be in there. That's not within the Mario system, right? Like that's not within the lore of Mario. Like I think Miyamoto once said about like I think it was one of the Paper Marios or one of the Mario and Luigi's. He was like very explicit to the team. It's like, no, you don't be adding like characters that exist outside of Super Mario World, you know, which is why there's like so many Toad, you know, NPCs and stuff like that. But in Mario RPG, there's like full races of people that like never appeared in another Mario game. I think I said this on the last episode we were talking about it, that like Mario can be like a jerk. Like if you want him to be, he can say rude things. Like you obviously like the game never blocks you in. Like if you say something mean, it's not going to lock you out from continuing forward progress. But the fact that there's an option, you know, for a character to be like, Mario, can you help us? And Mario can be like, nah, I'm busy. You know, is like, it's such a, like Nintendo wouldn't put up with that these days. And the thing that I really admire about the game is whoever sort of whose idea it was at Nintendo or whoever greenlit it, like they've been weirdly secretive about the developer and stuff like that. I don't even know that Square Enix was really involved in the development. I could be totally wrong about that.
Yeah,
But
that was actually a question I had because I've been looking it up, trying to see if there's any trace that Square Enix has been involved with this, because it was Square developed back when it originally came out.
I mean, I will say, like there are things in the game that Square would have needed to sign off on, you know, which is like a tease for people who have never played Mario RPG. Maybe this is the first time they're playing it, but like there are Square things in there that they would have had to at least looked at and been like, yeah, sure, we'll allow it, you know. So
maybe it's part of the agreement to get Sora in Smash Brothers. They're like,
I mean,
also,
honestly, there might be some weird stuff that kind of like, you know, the whole Oswald the Lucky Rabbit making its way back to Disney as a product of Epic Mickey being made by Warren Spector and stuff like that. There's like all those like weird deals that these companies make in those instances. But I just love that like it feels like out of time in a good way. And then there's I think there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that they cleaned up to just make it feel like more contemporary, like just move a little better and just feel a little better and be a little more welcoming. Like I think Mario RPG is a game you can go back to. It's not so dated that like I feel like Final Fantasy VI is harder to go back to than Super Mario RPG, because Mario RPG is like an active, colorful, fun, not overly complicated RPG, where Final Fantasy VI is a little stiff, you know, and like just kind of there's a sort of a glass that you need to break through to sort of get into that game. And there's still farming and stuff like that. But I think they made the right amount of calls of like, let's keep this weird stuff is absolutely staying. We're not cutting any of this. This is all in here. And I'm like, yes, thank you for not cutting any of that stuff, because that's what makes Mario RPG special. But then to just be like just still a solid RPG, and they cleaned up the little things that make it just more palatable, like, is great. You know, I don't know where I land on the score, but like really loved it and really loved revisiting it. I thought I would have had my RPG fill with Sea of Stars earlier this year, and it's funny because they cited Mario RPG heavily as like a major influence on the game. So it is funny to basically ostensibly play those games back to back, because I do see the direct lines, but it ended up feeling like great. Like just it's so like digestible that I was like, I just had a great time going back to it. So very, very positive on Super Mario RPG for sure.
So you've done a lot of writing about Sea of Stars. You wrote our cover story on that, right?
Did. Yeah.
You reviewed it for us. You gave it a 9. You've talked about it on this podcast, but you absolutely love that game. We're getting into the end of year discussions, just to kind of lift the curtain up a little bit for the listeners and readers of Game Informer. We're starting our end of year discussions for like the best of the best and everything. And Sea of Stars, Sea of Stars is one of those that keeps coming up on multiple occasions. And I guess like, how would you compare these two? Because like that is a game that is a new game that is trying for a retro aesthetic and retro mechanics. This is the kind of converse of that, where it's a retro game that is bringing it up forward into modern aesthetics.
Yeah. So what's your sort of main question is like,
How would you compare these two? If like
how would I
they're
compare them?
very they're very similar, but kind of approaching the same target in different from
Different,
opposite ends of the
yeah.
spectrum. You know?
Um, yeah. I mean, I honestly, Sea of Stars is the more contemporary embracer of modern video game lessons, right? If you came up to me and you're like, I'm in the mood for kind of a sort of a 16-bit era or 16-bit inspired RPG, I would actually say Sea of Stars. Like, I think Sea of Stars is a better paced, more interesting narrative game. But Super Mario is like it really feels like a good retelling of that original game. Like I think they really they made it feel modern without deleting what made it special, which is like a really hard line to walk. I do think if you've never played Mario RPG and you're kind of interested in the game, I think you would enjoy it. I don't think it's just nostalgia, because I realize as I'm playing it, like, the things I remember about Mario RPG, other than just like a larger sort of umbrella affection for it, was like I remember the beginning and I remember the
Mm-hmm.
end. And it turns out I really did not remember a lot of the in between. Like, it felt so new to me that I was like, I think like even newcomers, I think would have a good. If I'm having so much fun with this and really not remembering hardly any of this, I'm sure newcomers would have a good time too.
Yeah, I mean, I am one of those newcomers, and I'm having a good time with it so far. Again, like when I was a kid, I only played kind of that intro sequence at a friend's house and thought this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life, and then never owned the game. So it's like if you don't own an RPG, it's kind of hard to
Yeah,
get through it. Like I could go to a friend's house and beat like Mario or something, but like
it's like,
doing that with an RPG is a taller task.
like renting a game at Blockbuster. It's like, oh, if I get it next week, maybe my save file will still be there. We'll
Oh my
see.
god, the anxiety that existed around that of like, I
Uh,
hope nobody else picked up this copy of A Link to the Past and deleted my save.
yeah,
Definitely,
don't deal with that anymore.
they did. They did delete it. But you used the phrase "baby's first RPG," and I think that applies to a pretty wide collection of role playing games from this era. So
Mm,
it's funny because I feel like there are two buckets. There's either baby's first RPG or this is for experts only, like
sure, yeah,
from this
yeah,
era anyway.
sure,
And
yeah.
my favorite baby's first RPG is always going to be like Pokemon Red Blue. And where would you put that on the spectrum when compared to Pokemon Red and Blue for like, okay, this is like baby's first RPG in terms of like approachability, in terms of like this is something you realistically could come into this as your first entry point in the genre and fully get like the entire experience.
I mean, I honestly, I think Mario RPG is like a better starter RPG
Mm,
because it is so much simpler. And that's like not to detract from Pokemon. Like, the cool thing about Pokemon is how many different ways you can take it. Like, if there's 150 creatures, each with 4 individual moves and classes and things like that, like you can arrange your team in different ways. Part of the game is like the background of like trying to figure out where Pokemon are that are secret and like collecting them all. And like the core RPG part of it, the gym badges and stuff, that's pretty straightforward. But a lot of the other stuff around it, like it can get as complicated as you want it to be, right?
mhm.
Where Mario RPG is like, you got Mario, you got 2 other teammates, you each have a selection of attacks, get to the end of the game. Like it's linear. It's a linear game. It's like just get stronger and stronger as you fight harder characters, and then at the end you'll beat the end boss, right? So I think it is simpler in that way. And I'm not saying like one's better than the other or anything like that. But if you're like truly want like the baseline, like I've never really played an RPG, I think Mario is like one of the best, if not the best.
And kind of playing off of that comparison, when Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee came out, I enjoyed a lot of what that game did, but they kind of went a little too far with the modernization of the mechanics and everything. But one thing that I was kind of less excited about was the art style of Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Just by the time I got to the end of it, I was like, this is just really bland and vanilla, and Let me dial that back because I don't like the use of vanilla as a detractor. I'll go back to bland because I'm a fan of vanilla. I put vanilla in my
It's a
protein
flavor.
shakes.
I don't know why
Vanilla's a
we
good flavor.
I don't know why we
Uh,
ended up, I probably have used it at some
it's
point
just a
too,
weird
but
colloquial term that we use,
yeah.
but really bland. And I wish that there was more to like more personality to the visuals of Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. How do you feel about the visual changes and upgrades that were made in Mario RPG?
They're good. I like that's tough because I am an old person, so I do just happen to like pixel things. Like there's no sort of getting around it that I'm just always going to be charmed by pixel art. And like the Mario RPG, I mean, when you look at the characters you recognize like Yoshi and Mario and stuff like that, they do look kind of generic.
Hmm.
These were I could be wrong about this, but these may have been the first instance where we saw something close to a 3D version of these characters.
I
Truly,
think it must be right because
those
this
were.
this preceded Super Mario 64.
Oh yeah, yeah. So, and they weren't really 3D per se, but like they looked 3D, and all
They
the
were
art.
3D in the sense of Donkey Kong Country.
Yes, and all the art on the box and stuff were those 3D models that they made. Um, So like the like I said, for the recognizable characters, it does feel like a little bit of, making it bland. But the thing about Mario RPG is that like its character designs are so strange and weird, and like mentioned earlier, like outside the typical Nintendo thing. Like Nintendo would not be designing characters like these anymore. Like the boss characters that you fight in Mario RPG are so bizarre and weird looking that like in it like contemporary Nintendo wouldn't sign off on them. Like they're just too like angular and sharp and
Hmm.
threatening, you know. So that stuff all comes forward, I think. Like the unique characters are all very charming. It was also nice to see Gino in a higher resolution because I've never quite understood what he was supposed to look like, if that makes sense, because he's a doll and he's like a Pinocchio situation where he's like a doll that gets taken over by a soul, and I've never quite understood what his deal is in that sort of 16 that somewhere between 16 and 32-bit like rendering. But
Well,
now
there's a
now I
concept art of it.
yeah, I mean, but that's not in the game. I never
Character
saw that
art,
when I was playing the game, really.
sure.
But like now I understand that the curls on his head are wood scrapings, and stuff
Hmm.
like that. And he's wearing like an overcoat. I will say there's another thing that I like that is it's funny because it's throwback to the following era of RPGs after Mario RPG is there are pre-rendered cutscenes. And like when you
Yes.
do big attacks and stuff like that, you get a pre-rendered cutscene that plays. And like those play and those look really good, and on a different platform other than Switch, like the game could have just looked like that the whole time. But on the other hand, though, it's kind of like I kind of like it as like a PlayStation era RPG throwback. Like I get this pre-rendered cutscene as a reward for making it this far in the story, or I get a pre-rendered cutscene for doing this crazy attack that I've been charging up for the last 7 matches. Stuff like that, is fun.
So
Um,
can you skip those
oh
or
yeah, yeah, you can
okay?
skip
Because
them.
like
Yeah.
I remember like I always sing the praises of Final Fantasy X, but one of the best things that Final Fantasy X HD did when they remastered that the 10 and 10.2 was give you the ability to do shorter summons. Like because those sequences were so long. It's like the first time you see it, you're like, oh, that's really awesome. Look how cool that looks. And then the 55th time that you see it, you're like, oh my God, we get it.
I know. You hit a point where you're like, I don't even want to use that attack because like I don't want to watch the cutscene. Right?
100%.
But no, you can absolutely play them once and then press start to skip them, which I did frequently. Absolutely.
How does the music sound? I know that you can bounce between the old version and the new arrangements, but which one did you end up preferring?
The new arrangements, actually.
Mm.
Yeah. Which it was partially like I wanted to hear them, less that I was like, I put them side by side and I was like, I prefer the new one as much as I just wanted to hear what it sounded like. But when I did, I would often go back and I would often turn on the old soundtrack if there was like a weird song that I was like, oh, I don't even know how this would have sounded in the past. Like there's one area up in the clouds where like there's a woman's voice in one of the songs, like that just comes through every couple of seconds where it just sings a few notes. And I was like, what did that even sound like on Super Nintendo? Did that they had like a sort of a what is Hatsune Miku? She's like a Vocaloid. I was like, did they have like a Vocaloid effect or something? And so I turned that on, and I was like, oh yeah, it does kind of sound like a woman's voice, you know. So I did enjoy that option to change the music. I like I said, I wish the whole game had like kind of where I could look at the original visuals, but I understand that basically would have been a different game. But it took they hew so closely to that original game that it almost it feels like they could have done that, you know. But
I mean, who knows? Like the technical uh, voodoo, we'll call it, that a lot of developers are able to do behind the scenes is just absurd. Again, like we referenced this in the preview episode that we did a couple weeks ago, the Master Chief Collection, or more specifically, Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary, just giving you the ability to switch between the original Xbox and the Xbox 360 version with the press of, I think, the select button.
mm-hmm.
That was just wizardry in my mind, because like, how did
really
they have? They must have just had the two engines running simultaneously, which is what I believe they did say that they ended up doing.
Yeah, it would have been cool to have that here, but I guess I don't know how feasible that possibly could have been. Yeah,
yeah, especially, I mean, I would imagine that's probably owned wholly by Square. I wonder if like that might be
I have
a
no
roadblock
idea.
there, because like maybe
I mean,
Square just
Nintendo published it, you know, and it was on the Wii U Virtual Console, you know.
yeah,
So I
but
don't, you know,
re-releasing a game on Virtual Console is very different from just having an
yeah,
all new game with like the full source code included.
yeah, no, absolutely, yeah, yeah. I have no idea how that would work, but
Where does the original stack up? Because it seems like you have a lot of affection for the original game.
yeah.
How much? Where does that stack in like your favorite RPGs of all time?
Gosh, that's a good question. Because I'm not like the biggest RPG guy. I haven't completed a lot of the Final Fantasies and stuff like that. But like, love Chrono Trigger, love Mario RPG, Golden Sun. I like a lot.
Hmm.
Sea of Stars this year. I do like that 16-bit era. Like, I am a fan of that era. Gosh, you know, I think I would put it below Chrono Trigger. But yeah, that's tough. Yeah, I think I would put it below Chrono Trigger, but above Golden Sun. And I'm not the biggest six fan. I know that's the sort of the go-to is Final Fantasy VI.
Sacrilegious.
Yeah, no, I know. Um, but yeah, one another sort of thinking about it that way. One thing, sometimes I'll play a remake of a game and it will sort of color me in the wrong direction, if that makes sense, where you kind of be like, oh yeah, this part of the game kind of sucked, or like, yeah, this doesn't hold up as well. I have the new visuals, but mechanically it doesn't hold up as well as it used to. I will say that playing the Mario RPG remake did color me in the right direction, where I was like, I think maybe I like this even more than I remembered. Like, because it's just so buttery smooth as an RPG that it really it made me reflect on it kindly. I mean, not 100%. I know I'm talking in these sort of like really big positive. I mean, there are flaws. It's not a perfect game. There are sort of dungeons that are too long, or you know, the time button pressing isn't as obvious as it should be for many of the attacks and stuff like that. Like, it's not like this perfect game that you should go out and play. But I was surprised. I really kind of went into it being like, I bet I'm going to really love this in the beginning, but then over time its flaws will kind of crop up, and I'll be like, oh yeah, it does turn out that this is an old RPG. But I never really ultimately ended up feeling that way. For the most part, here and there were a couple little things, but overall I was like, yeah, no, this is still super fun.
So, getting back to that original question, top 10 RPGs of all time, you think? The original? Top
um
15?
for me personally, and like what I like from RPGs, maybe just because I happen to have a lot of affection for that era. And Mario RPG, like I've said a number of times, like, was the first turn-based RPG I ever finished, and like it
Mm-hmm.
made me understand what was fun about the genre, where I had struggled with it previously. And then, you know, there's all these factors of like, well, what counts as an RPG, you know, what it's like.
It was a lot clearer defined back then, right? Like,
Yeah. But I think if I had to make my personal, here are Kyle's top 10 RPGs, I think it would be top 5, just because of the sort of specific affection I have for it and how it sort of turned me onto the genre. Like, that's kind of always going to be undeniable, even if there are like better games, you know.
mm.
Like, in the same way, I always say Ocarina of Time is always going to be my favorite game of all time, because it will just, no other game will ever unseat how important that game was to me on a personal level,
Well,
right?
I said that, and then Breath of the Wild came out, so you
And
never
I
say never, I
maintained,
guess.
I stood strong, and I still claim Ocarina as my favorite game.
But like I was surprised. I thought for sure that I would never get the feeling that Ocarina gave me back in
Yeah.
1998 when I first played that, and then almost 30 years later, Breath of the Wild
Lo and
did it.
behold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you that same question, but with relation to this remake.
Yeah.
Where does this remake rank on your favorite RPGs of 2023?
2023. Yeah, there were a lot.
Good year
So
for RPGs.
yeah, can you help me out a little bit? Like, so Sea of Stars, I like a lot. Um,
Baldur's Gate.
Mario RPG. Baldur's Gate is not really my style of game.
Okay.
Admittedly, I'm just not really into choice-driven CRPGs. It's just not going to be my thing. I totally admire that game for what it's doing, but it's just didn't click with me. I don't think there is a world where it does click with me. I've been playing Star Ocean, Second
Oh,
Story R a little bit, and I've been enjoying that. I had no idea that was an action RPG. That like totally surprised me. I thought I didn't. I had no idea. So I was like, oh, cool.
we
Um,
have Final Fantasy 16.
right? Yeah. That's an action game. I hate to break it to you.
Yeah, it is. Despite the Final Fantasy name, that's closer to Devil May Cry than it was
Yeah.
like that original vision for Final Fantasy.
Gosh, as I'm listing them off, the big ones, like a lot of the big ones this year just didn't do it for me. 16, I fell off of after a couple hours. Starfield, I fell off of after a couple of hours. Baldur's Gate, I fell off of after a couple hours. So, like,
Did you
it's
play any of the
funny.
Legend of Heroes games? There were like 3 of them that came out this year.
No, yeah, I didn't touch those, though. I hear good things. I mean, I think if I'm like on like
Darkest Dungeon,
Darkest Dungeon, yeah, I didn't touch that one. So, I mean, in a weird way,
Octopath.
mine would probably be Sea of Stars, and then Sea of Stars, then Mario RPG, and then maybe Starfield, and then maybe Star Ocean if I keep going with Star Ocean, and then you know,
We could have had another game with if they just kept Legend of the Seven Stars, it would have all had stars right in the name.
I know it is. I guess it's the right call if they dropped that. It's not like anyone ever called it by its full name, and it doesn't
Yeah.
add anything to the game really.
Doesn't add
Uh,
anything to anything aside from being a Square Enix title.
that's true. Yeah, yeah. I guess like playing the game knowing that there are 7 stars is helpful because you're like, okay, I've got the 4th one. I got a couple more here. I
But
guess
if I'm
that's
not mistaken,
helpful.
doesn't it show like 7 silhouettes in
Yeah, I
the
mean they
menu?
say 7. They tell you it's 7. But if it's the title of the game, then there's no forgetting at all.
Man, we really almost got a full sweep of games with star in the title,
Yeah.
but they removed it from Super Mario RPG.
It is so I can't I hope maybe I'll get a chance to ask them soon. But the it is so funny the Sea of Stars. I would love to ask those folks like the fact that Mario RPG is such like a clear inspiration for them. Like the 2 games that called out were Mario RPG and Chrono Trigger. Those were the
Mhm.
2 main inspirations for Sea of Stars. And it's like the game comes out and then they announce they're remaking Mario RPG is so funny. And then Star Ocean comes out, which Sea of Stars, whether intentional or not, has always felt like a play on that title, even
Yeah.
though we never really talked about Star Ocean when I talked to them about the game for the cover story. But it's funny that all 3 of those games all came out this year. What a weird thing.
Did you play Chained Echoes? That's the other one that I hear compared to like games from that era. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it is a 2023 game. It came out, I think, in December of 2022, so it
Yeah,
like missed
no,
this.
I downloaded it with the intention to play because I like that era of RPGs, but
Yeah,
I never got around to it. And I mean, if I'm being honest with myself, I don't know that I will. But I mean, everyone who played it was very positive on it.
I mean, all the games that we're talking about here, aside from Starfield, are on Switch. Like, I've talked about this at length about how the Switch is such a good platform for strategy games because there are just so many tactical RPGs on the platform. But really looking at like just like kind of retro style RPGs, that it's another like haven for those as well. Like
I know.
we've talked about all these. Also, there's the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters on Switch. I believe it's still the
That's
only
right.
console that has those. I don't think it's on PlayStation or Xbox yet. I think it's only
Yeah.
PC and Switch, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think you might be right about that. Yeah, because I was looking at 6. I was like, man, should I play Final Fantasy 6? Should I finally beat that game on my Switch?
Oh, never mind. Pixel Remaster is available on PlayStation, it
Okay.
appears. So
But it is wild. You're right that also came out this year.
yeah, there's just oh my god, what an unbelievable year for RPGs. But Kyle, I know
Good year.
my top 3 to 5 RPG list of all time. It goes Final Fantasy X, and then number 2, Persona 5, one of my
Royal?
favorite games of all time. And we have a new spin-off that I'm going to talk about a little bit here.
Do it.
Persona 5 Tactica. This kind of follows along the lines of the other spin-offs that we've got, where it seems to completely ignore the other stuff that has come out after the original Persona 5. So it ignores Strikers. That storyline is not referenced at all as far as I've seen so far. Again, I'm only like 4 or 5 hours deep into the story so far. It does not reference any of the stuff in Royal, which is still kind of perplexing to me because
that's weird. That's a weird one. Like
that's
Strikers, I almost understand, but Royal is surprising. Yeah,
it's very weird to me that none of this stuff referenced. So, like the characters that are introduced in Royal, you just never see them in any of like the subsequent adventures, which I guess makes sense because like they're not really considered canonical. I don't think. Like I think in talking to the development team and the PR people for both of those games, Strikers and Tactica, they've told me that like, oh, this is just kind of like a fun spin-off story. It's not really like a canonical thing that happens in the world of Persona 5.
Can I ask you a big Persona lore question?
Oh God, yes.
Do all 5 games exist in the same universe?
I don't think so.
And then there's the fighting games, and they contextualize it by saying they're like interdimensional. Is that how they kind of do it?
I don't know much about how they contextualize the fighting games. Like I got into Persona through Persona 5.
Right.
And then I went back and played P4G, loved it. And then I tried to play P3P, Persona 3 Portable, when it came to Switch. And I was like, nope, this is a bridge too far in terms of like going into like the Wayback Machine and trying to like play these older games. Like Persona 4 Golden has aged like wine. Persona 3 Portable has kind of aged like milk, which is why I'm so excited for Persona 3 Reload. Like I think that game, which is not coming to Switch, unfortunately, at least not at launch. I would be shocked if they didn't do the whole like what they did with Persona 5, where they were like, okay, it's coming only to like modern consoles, and then like years down the road even put it out on Switch because or whatever Nintendo's console is at that point, because it seems like Nintendo's pretty well positioned right now, and that's if they put out another portable console like a lot of people are saying they might, then that's the perfect game to have on the go. Like any kind of Persona game is so good on the go.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, like they all take place in different universes. Again, I love Persona a lot, but I am still very much like a newbie when it comes to
I'm putting you on the spot with this
and everything.
Big question, to be fair. I understand.
All I know is that Persona 5 Tactica, Persona 5 Strikers, and Persona 5 Royal do not appear to be canon. It seems that the true canon of Persona 5 is the original Persona 5. The rest of it is just kind of like fun side stories that maybe don't take place in that universe. Which sucks because a lot of the new characters they introduce are really great. Like I like a lot of the characters in Strikers and Royal. And so far, what I've seen of Irina, who's one of the 2 main characters in Persona 5 Tactica.
Her name's Irina?
Irina. Erina.
Oh, okay.
Like Aaron with an A at the end.
Okay, because Persona, the fighting game, is Arena, like a proper.
I didn't even make that connection.
But it's spelled. It's a different name. It's spelled completely different, right?
It is.
Yeah. Okay.
They also have a bad guy named Lady Marie, but it's pronounced Marie, even though it is Marie. So,
okay.
We'll go with that. But basically, the entire story about Persona 5 Tactica is it takes the characters following the events of Persona 5. Again, no reference to Royal, no reference to Strikers. I did find a little bit of an allusion to like, oh, this could be a vague implication of like there's another story, because they're like they find a character and they're like, oh, you know who the Phantom Thieves are? It's like, yeah, after your last adventure, of course I do. And like they just left it seemingly intentionally vague to be like, oh yeah, that thing that we did in Royal or that thing we did in Strikers. But who knows what they're actually referencing there. But it takes them and they're on a new adventure, and basically they're in their coffee house that they base their operations out. They're just kind of chilling, like talking about like, oh, what a shame. We're all going to be going off to school soon and we're going to have to go our separate ways. And then like this event happens, and then like they like the kind of the world shakes and they go outside and the entire world has changed.
Question. Are they in that chibi art style at this point already?
They are.
Okay, okay.
This game
It's
exists
throughout
in
the
the
whole
chibi
game.
art style.
Okay,
Yes.
cool, cool, cool. That's what I was curious
So
about.
they go outside and they're in like this kind of like weird, like surreal. I don't even know how to explain it, but there's like legionnaires all over the place, like these like old style soldiers that are they attack them, and it breaks out into turn-based tactical strategy gameplay. And you kind of just everybody has their persona that they can use. Everybody has a gun for like ranged attacks, and everybody has, if you really want to get like up close and personal, they have a strong like physical attack, like a melee attack. But that's really risky in a strategy game because you have no cover at that point and you're just completely exposed. So like if you're going to do that, you better hope that it's either super effective, aka critical, which means that it's going to knock them down and give you a one more attack, which gives you another action in that turn, which you can move and then attack again, or defeat that enemy altogether and not leave you open to attack from any other enemies. So I like that approach because usually it's like, oh, this enemy is like weak to gun, but I think that they're vulnerable to my melee attack. But oh, is it gonna leave me open to attack from that other guy that's over on the other side of the map? And there's always kind of like that risk reward that you have to balance. And then there's also the persona aspect where everybody has kind of their own like elemental style attack where Morgana has a wind based attack, On has fire based, and Arena kind of has like a confusion based attack. It's almost like a psychic damage. And and she kind of acts almost as like, if you're not a Persona fan, she kind of acts as like the newcomer who fills your like the shoes of the viewer of like, oh, I don't know what Persona is. Like she like one of her early questions is like, how do you get a Persona? Like, should I have a Persona? And like you can answer. They do that thing where it's like there's dialogue options, but no matter what you answer, like it may like have a different response from one of the NPCs, but then they just get right back on script. Like one of the answers you can give, like, oh, what's a Persona? How do I get one of those? And like you can just be like, you just get really angry and yell, because like that's what all of the cutscenes were. It was kind of a
Oh,
funny
sure.
joke, where they get really like angry
Angry and
or
yell.
yeah, and they yell, and it's very much like going Super Saiyan. Just to bring it back to a reference you'll
Oh, yes,
understand, Kyle.
thank you.
You've
Right.
heard of Goku.
We're close friends, Goku and I, Goku-san.
But yeah, like it seems so far like a pretty solid turn-based strategy RPG. The story has not really picked up legs yet, as of what I've reached so far. That Lady Marie is kind of like this giant pink lady in a wedding dress, and she seems to be like the ruler of this first. They're called kingdoms in this. They were called palaces before,
Okay.
where it was kind of like the metaverse where you go in and like this distorted reality, but you're like actually in like the consciousness of like the target that you're going after.
Mhm.
This, I don't quite know what the actual like reasoning behind like this distorted reality is, but like they call it a kingdom. I'm assuming there's extra kingdoms in this world. But she has like the way they described her is like she is in the perpetual state of preparing for the perfect wedding, which is a very weird thing. And so she's always in a
Tongue
wedding
twister.
dress and she is enslaving all these people. She has the power to like mind control people. So that's the first thing she does is she mind controls your entire party, which is a very good excuse for them to be like, okay, you have to use these three characters and you have to rescue the other characters one by one. So like first up, you rescue An and Futaba, and we're not going to go any further in the story than that. But like, you slowly start rebuilding back your party, and you get another new character in there. But they all have their individual powers. I'm getting to the point now where it's like, okay, now like there's a skill tree that I can branch out on and see how like I develop them using different experience points that I gain. It seems like the experience is shared by the entire party, which I kind of like. So it's not going to be like I have to go into this encounter with like my party of Morgana, Joker, and Arena and never use On, and then it's like maybe down the road there'll be a time where I have to use On in some sort of mission, and it's going to be like, well, she's completely underpowered. It seems like the leveling is party wide, so that's very nice and reassuring. It's a nice quality of life thing.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how distinct their skill trees end up being. I'm still like kind of in the very, very beginning stages of that. And also it's interesting because like I'll have a character get downed and so far I have not had the ability, at least not that I've seen, that I can like use items. And now the Futaba, I haven't really used
Hmm.
her abilities yet, but I know she has like some kind of passive healing abilities. But yeah, I'm still kind of getting a feel for like how exactly all the mechanics play in concert with one another, how they play off of like the core Persona mechanics, implement them into the turn-based strategy infrastructure. But so far, I'm having a really good time with it. I do like that they have a distinct take on kind of the all-out attacks that the Persona series is known for. So in the RPGs, if you knock down all the enemies with like critical hits, then you can you kind of rush up to them and you can either negotiate with them to get like special like items or whatever, or you can do an all-out attack, which is just a super powerful. Everybody in the party attacks at once. It's always like kind of like a cinematic
Pre-rendered,
cutscene.
unskippable cutscene.
It's thankfully it's very quick, so it's not like a super long cutscene. They did that in Strikers as well, which I thought was kind of cool. But with this, the way it works is it's all based on positioning. So you have three party members, and you have to form a triangle with those three party members surrounding a group of enemies. And if you do that, the lines connecting your party members will form like a flaming triangle,
Oh,
and that
okay.
signals to you that you can pull. I think it's the right trigger and activate an all out attack, and then that does a pretty devastating damage. That actually saved me in one of the encounters that I had where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to win this one, and then I remembered that existed, and I got into position like by moving a character in one direction. I'm like, oh, awesome, yeah, great, perfect. So
Do
I'm
if you okay, so there's like XCOM over here and maybe like Rabbids over here. Fire Emblem and Final Fantasy Tactics is like somewhere on this line. Like, where does Persona fall? Like, what is it? Like what is it the closest to? Right? Like, if you're a fan of this, Tactica is for you.
I would say it's somewhere between Fire Emblem and Mario plus Rabbids. Like it
Okay,
seems so far like
grid based.
it is it's one of those things where it's grid based, but you freely move and like you can run around the battlefield like seeing like, okay, here are the limits of your movement, and then like when you go into like a position, it'll tell you, okay, you can attack this enemy with your gun or this enemy with a melee attack. So you
But you're
have
not.
plenty
There
of
aren't
time.
squares though. You're not
They are
moving.
squares, so you will
They are
end up
okay.
in a square.
Okay.
And
Okay.
when
Okay.
you do a melee attack, one thing I do like is like when you do a melee attack, they usually go flying, and then you step into the spot they were. So there are
Okay.
healing squares like placed around the field sometimes. And if there's like an enemy on a healing square, you can knock them out of it. They'll go flying backwards, and you take that spot.
Right.
So it's kind of nice in the strategy of that aspect of it. But yeah, it certainly feels closer to one of the more casual tactical RPGs than something like XCOM, which I also love. I love XCOM. Like I've had XCOM 2 collection installed on my Switch since it came out. Like that is one that I will play forever. Like I think I bought XCOM 2 on or XCOM 1 on Vita, I believe it was on.
Really?
And just
Wow.
because
That's
I was like,
right.
oh, I want this on the go. And then I think XCOM came out on iPhone and I bought it there like a long time ago. I'm sure it's completely broken with all the updates now. I doubt Firaxis or 2K or whoever ended up developing the mobile version of that has been updating it after all the innovations the iPhone has had. But there's just a lot of great DNA between Persona 5 Tactica and the Persona 5, like the base RPG
Mhm.
brought into it. And I like that. And the thing that I'm most excited about, which I don't know how much they're going to get into it, because like one of the key elements of the Persona RPGs are the social links, right? Like you want to have these interactions with these characters, and then as you get to know them better, you unlock new scenes with these characters. They get more powerful because you have a stronger bond with them. They'll sometimes learn new attacks, new abilities. And I don't know how far they're going to go on this. I have a feeling not very far. It certainly seems like the like you can have side conversations with the characters when you're back at the hideout, but so far it seems pretty linear in terms of like
Okay.
the interactions you're going to have, the cutscenes that are going to play. It's not like at least not that I've seen so far. You can't just be like, okay, I want to take on out on a date, and then we're gonna get like closer because of that, and then she's gonna unlock like upgrades to her character. It just seems like you choose their skills based on the experience that you accrue as you play through it. There are also optional objectives like don't get attacked more than 3 times in the course of this battle, or finish this battle in 7 turns or less. And then that, I'm
Mhm.
assuming, gives you extra XP. And all the characters obviously have unique abilities. Arena just unlocked one where she like plants a flag and it's like kind of like a rallying cry for the team. So there's there's a lot of cool stuff at play, and I'm really really interested to see how it continues to evolve. We do, as of the time this episode is live, we should have a review from a freelancer up on GameInformer.com. I am not the one reviewing it. I'm just checking it out for the sake of talking about it on this podcast. But I'm loving it, and
Cool.
if it continues evolving the way it has, I could see myself considering it one of my probably top 10 games of the year. But of course, there's so many games I have not even gotten time to get to because, as the catchphrase goes on this episode or this podcast, with what time?
I know this whole year, man. It's insane.
But yeah, does this sound like something you'd check out?
Um, I've never found a tactics game that I really fell in love with, if I'm being fully honest. Like, it's
That's
just
fair.
not typically my genre. Like Mario Rabbids, I played like half of both of them. Well, that's actually not true. I played half of the first one and like an hour or two of the second one. And my reaction was like, yeah, this is charming and like well done and cool. But it's just like generally speaking, I need a more active form of sort of engagement when it comes to sort of a versus like even a turn-based RPG does more for me of just being like actively attacking. Now that said, I have it downloaded. I always like to check in on these games. I think it looks cool. I actually kind of like the art style. I know that's sort of been a point of contention of like the original is so good, right?
Yeah.
Like, but I'm always like totally in any game that I love, frankly. Like I'm all for like trying something different, and maybe it hits, maybe it doesn't, but I'd like it to sort of have its own sort of style. Like Strikers just sort of doesn't really, it just is an extension of what Persona 5 did, so it doesn't really have as much of its own identity.
Mm-hmm.
But so all of that is a roundabout way of saying like I would like to check it out. I think my family is going to play it because both my wife and daughter like Persona a lot. So I think they're going to play it. So I'll probably see a lot of it. But I don't know. We'll see if I actually. Are you playing on Switch or are you playing on console?
I am playing on Switch, and so I
Okay.
did a preview event that I talked about, I think, on this podcast. I don't know. There's a lot of episodes of this podcast, and I did that back over the summer, and I played that on PS5.
Right.
This one I've been playing on Switch, and I will say that the only difference that I'm really noticing is that the loading times going into battles, and like if I skip like a dialogue sequence or something, because I've accidentally done that a couple times, where I'll hit start by accident and it'll just like it'll
Hope
push me
they
out of the
weren't saying
scene.
anything important.
And it does take a little bit sometimes to get into a battle, whereas at least during my demo session, it seemed like the transition was almost instant. And
Well, that's
that's just
cool.
the benefit of the SSD, right? That the PlayStation has, that the Switch does not. And honestly, it has had me thinking that that's my number one wish outside of like backward compatibility and like still being a hybrid system and like better graphics and everything. Like my number one want for a Switch 2 or whatever it ends up being called is SSD, because it just makes the load time so much better. I'm assuming that would help a lot with like some of like the streaming problems that a lot of Switch games have had, like with like pop in and everything. Like being able to have an SSD that integrates with the processor and whatever it is that Xbox has like touted, like, oh, we've got a processor that takes advantage of the SSD. And I think that if Nintendo, I mean, look at how tiny those SSDs are that you can install on your PlayStation 5. Like they are very slim. Like
Yeah, they're expensive
it's
though.
they're expensive, but not like prohibitively so, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
they're coming down a lot. Like I just bought a 1 terabyte one on my PS5 to add in, and it was on sale on like Amazon for like 60-70 bucks. So
I guess the reason I even said that is because that's what Nintendo is saying. I think, right? It's like this would up the price too much, but man, I would rather have a solid state than an OLED screen myself.
oh, 100%, yeah. But yeah, if you want to read more about either of the games that we talked about on this episode, go to GameInformer.com. We should have a freelancer review up of Persona 5 Tactica by the time this episode goes live. And Kyle, I'm assuming your Super Mario RPG review will also be live. So
unless there's some kind of disaster.
Well, I hope not. I hope you're okay.
I don't even want to. I shouldn't have said that out loud. But yeah, the review should be on the site.
But yeah, both these games are available today on Switch. Mario RPG exclusively on Switch, and Persona 5 Tactica is one of many Switch is one of many platforms for that game. It's also available on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. Which, by the way, it leaked a week and a half early on Steam, very briefly.
Oh, really?
Somebody threw the Switch early on Steam last Wednesday, or I think last Wednesday. I woke up and saw
missed that. Oh, weird. Yeah, so just a couple people grabbed it and they're already playing it.
I think it was more than a couple people. I don't know if like Atlas was able to like deactivate their purchase remotely, but I would imagine if they bought it and then like took Steam offline or something like that, they were able to just play the full version for whenever.
Take advantage of the mistake. What should I tell you?
Kyle, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of All Things Nintendo.
You're welcome. Thanks for assigning me the Super Mario RPG review, Brian. I appreciate it.
And thank you so much to everyone for listening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, throw All Things Nintendo a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button. If you want to get any questions or comments in, you can get in touch with me at allthingsnintendo@GameInformer.com. You can also join the Game Informer community Discord, which is a perk for subscribing to our Twitch channel, even just for 1 month. Kyle, plug something.
Oh, follow me on X. Follow me on X. Do it. I don't know. Blue Sky. I'm over there a lot too.
All right. Well, that is our show for this week. Thank you all again so much for listening. Take care. We will see you next time.